Lubbock City Council to order. Today is April 22nd, 2020. We are in an emergency meeting of our council this morning. We have one item on our agenda this morning, but I believe that we do have one citizen comment. So let's start with that citizen comment. City Secretary's office, could you help us with that, please?
Becky, I don't see Courtney on there. Are you going to read the citizen comments?
Mr. Mayor, if needed, I think I can print and read that if you would like.
Okay, let me give the City Secretary's office one more minute. Becky, are you there? Okay.
Mayor,
she's not online, and neither is Courtney.
Okay. I'll let the city manager read this citizen comment. And I'll remind everyone that we're not changing our policy, our council rules around citizen comments. And these have to be done in 3 minutes. And they have to be, since we're taking them via email, they had to be in by 8 o'clock this morning. So Mr. Atkinson, if you don't mind reading that for us, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd be glad to do that. Your comment, and I apologize, I don't have the official submission. I have a copy. Your comment today comes from Mrs. Skeet Workman, dated 4/20/2020. Dear Mayor and City Council members, regarding coronavirus discussion. I have talked to some of you about opening barbershops and beauty salons because there is a need for some of us to get our haircuts and to look better. This virus has caused stress and depression. When you look good, you feel so much better. My husband was looking like a caveman. I used to cut his hair when he was in graduate school, but that has been years ago. But I am way out of practice today. I also have arthritis badly in my shoulders and arms, and I cannot roll my hair and wash it like I did years ago. For an example of how a simple plan can keep us safe, but still help ourselves and our businesses, I could call my hairdresser and make an appointment. Then park in front of the shop at the designated time and wait in the car. My beautician can call me on my cell phone to tell me to come in as it is my turn. I will wear my mask and gloves. This would be 2 people. If a barber or beautician does not want to do this, he or she can make that decision, not the city or state government. Any citizen who is fearful and does not want to go out can stay at home. Texans have many good, common sense decisions in the past. Each small business can come up with a safe plan to sell to the public. They are losing their businesses. We must not let this virus kill the incomes of good West Texas people and businesses. Submitted, Mrs. Skeet Workman, born and raised in Lubbock, graduated from Monterey High and Texas Tech. That's the only comment I believe we have there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Atkinson, for that. I misspoke a minute ago. I was looking at the addendum to our agenda. So we are in work session, and we're posted for 2 items in work session after the citizen comments. Item 1, 2 is an update on coronavirus in general, but not limited, including but not limited to financial impact, response, and operational adjustments. And so I'll let Mr. Atkinson lead that discussion. Jared?
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. We'll begin today with some good financial news. The City of Lubbock has received an allocation from the Bureau of Justice Assistance. This allocation is in the amount of $605,451. We expect this to come to the council in late May for allocation, or for appropriation, excuse me. Just as we saw with the public health grants that you appropriated at your last meeting, this one also allows expenses to be eligible as long as they were incurred on or after February the 1st. We might all check and see if our mics are muted. Okay, this grant is eligible for expenses that were incurred on or after February the 1st, 2020, and expenses must be incurred in a 12-month period. The three major categories that will be available for the reimbursement under this grant: overtime, provision of personal protective equipment, various supplies, and then certainly not for the city, but for other institutions that operate detention centers, they're eligible for those expenses as well. That's a separate allocation from us. So I think that's some good news and really continues the trend that was established by the Department of Health and Human Services for those public health grants. Second item, and just a point of interest and kind of a point of congratulation, your city water and wastewater labs, the place where they actually do all the chemistry work, they've now produced 8 liters of made in Lubbock hand sanitizer. We are using that largely at the EOC and at City Hall. We appreciate the creativity of that staff out there, and just would note that frees up other supplies for other institutions around the city if we're using and making and using our own. Another point of interest, your environmental health department, they do continue working with our restaurants. They have now moved to doing a virtual inspection to where our inspectors start in the parking lot and an employee in the facility on Zoom, what we're using today, work their way through the inspections. If there is something that requires a closer look, we will send the inspectors in. Of course, they're using the appropriate PPE when they do. Residential solid waste collections are continuing at 2 times our monthly average. We know that the lawn waste is starting to pick up, but what's gone before has not been lawn waste. I think you're seeing the impact of more people being at home. Finally, on just some data points, I want to talk about residential construction permits. So through the month of March, the complete month, the city issued 184 permits for single family residential. That is nearly a record number. That was a tremendous month. Through just a little more than 1/2 of April, we're at 92. So the trajectory is relatively the same. I don't think it will top March, but I think it's going to remain much closer than we presumed when we had this same visit just a couple of weeks ago. So that shows that at least for that industry, things are still moving and there's still a demand. I'm going to conclude my comments with just a couple of reminders about data. We're really getting into that point now where we've got enough, we can focus and drill in. Councilman Massengale is going to talk about the Lubbock Economic Recovery Task Force in a moment. We'll tell you that what we're asking that group to look at are kind of 3 measurements. The first being hospitals, and this would be usage versus capacity. As you watch the city's website, you see now for quite a lengthy period of time, our hospital usage for COVID patients is really remaining in a very, very narrow spread, usually just a little over 30 beds collectively used. Capacity, of course, varies, and it varies by whatever else might be going on in those facilities. In all cases, that delta between the COVID use and the hospital capacity, and not every bed is available for COVID, but it's still a good measure, that delta remains at plus 650 beds. So that is holding tight. That will continue to be updated. We do know that the governor through GA15 is lifting some of the suspensions off of hospitals and other licensed facilities to allow other procedures. So we will see a bit of that, but we're probably 2 weeks from seeing it. I think the next one is looking at the daily new cases. As you know, 1 week ago, we had 3 days over 30 new cases, pretty significant. This week, those daily new cases have held much lower. And then the third data point would be to track your actives. So look at your daily new versus your daily active. And I do think in Lubbock, you are really seeing both of those begin to flatten out. And over time, as those actives falls back down, that's going to get to be even a smaller delta. And in that case, that differential is good. The trends that we are seeing in the data, the community exposure, that's that one category that's maybe most easily described as we don't know where that individual contracted it. The community exposure is going up extremely slowly. That is a very positive number. Our empirical number goes up by somewhere between 2 and let's say 5 over the course of a week. But as a percentage of your wholes, percentage of your total cases, that percentage is declining. So I think that's very positive. Would highlight one that you'll soon not see anymore, and that are your travel cases. Our travel cases in Lubbock have remained flat for a period of 16 days now. Early, we had some international travel. Later on, we had some domestic travel. We have not had a change in the number of travel cases in 16 days. So as that works people out of the system, you'll see that one totally disappear. Testing capacity. As of Monday, our testing capacity was growing at an average of 254 new tests per day. Yesterday, we booked over 300 net new tests. We are modifying the online graphics to where you will be able to see not only the total of our testing, but how much it changes each day. As a quick reminder, you've got 2 things happening this week that's going to cause that cumulative number to increase more rapidly. First is the availability of the rapid tests that are being deployed through the Covenant system, and also the deployment of those through Covenant's clinic system. So that is coming, and that will increase our numbers. Second, you have our 3rd large drive-through clinic that will be opening for full business on Friday this week. That's a partnership between the city, Lubbock County, and Walmart. That one will be at the Walmart at 114th and Quaker. And I certainly want to thank the county for their assistance as it relates to manpower. It was very essential. And Judge Parrish, the sheriff, they all stepped right up to help us do that. Finally, we are working on establishing another drive-up clinic. This would be a more targeted drive-up clinic that will be located at the Patterson Library. Our target is to have that one standing up and working Wednesday of next week. We'll be able to use one of the new electronic record systems at Public Health. Anybody that needs a test and chooses to use that facility can basically pick up a phone or use an email and get themselves set up such that when they go to the clinic, there's very minimal paperwork. They can very quickly take the swab, allow that person to leave, submit it to the lab. Taken together, I think you're going to see our average increase per day on testing start increasing by well over 300 plus per day. Would remind council as we start making our efforts to reopen, the one common factor in any of the reopen guidance is the widespread availability of testing. We are already at 2 times the state average. You are 2 times more likely to be able to get tested in Lubbock than across the state. And I think that's going to increase dramatically as we move forward. My final comment, council, you have a regularly scheduled meeting next Tuesday, April the 28th. I do think you will have some presentations and action related to the next steps to getting Lubbock going. With that, Mayor, I would stop and either take questions or turn it over to Mr. Massengale.
Why don't we go ahead and let Mr. Massengale make his comments about the task force, and then we'll open the floor for questions and input. Okay, Steve?
Thank you, Mayor. Lubbock Economic Recovery Task Force, 22 members on that group. It's co-chaired by myself and Robert Taylor. We had a great first meeting on Monday. We've since split into groups. One of the more important groups at this point is the Get Lubbock Open Committee. That committee met yesterday and discussed and was very productive in finding a path that's gradual, safe, and responsible to getting Lubbock back open. They'll spend a few hours together today and tomorrow, and our task force will reconvene on Friday to consider their recommendations. Our work has been on a very aggressive path this week. Our goal is to submit recommendations to the City Council on our April 28th meeting.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, I'll open the floor for questions about for Mr. Atkinson or Mr. Massengale, or comments from the council. Mayor Pro Tem, we'll start with you. You have anything?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Jeff.
I have a concern that I would like to reference the task force, that I believe the task force needs to consider. And that is, as we've gone through reopening businesses and the plan of that, there was changes last Friday in the SASA document 3.0. A major change, as everyone, and Mr. Atkinson was kind enough to send us this document, was the change to automotive dealers and reopening up those businesses. I believe there was another very important change in that document Friday. And obviously the governor has utilized in his April 17th, which is GA 17, he still references the SASA document that we should utilize. In the change on the SASA document on Friday, which is again labeled 3.0, the very last page now has a category. It's page 16. Again, this was Friday afternoon. The header is hygiene products and services. Bullet point number 3, in my opinion, is very accurate. It says workers providing personal and household goods, comma, repair, comma, and maintenance. In the previous document, the SASA 2.0, there were no commas. And I think this opens up a lot of availability, but I believe that the task force really needs to look at this, because I believe that today there are businesses that are closed in Lubbock that should be open. As I analyzed this over the weekend, this meant more and more to me, and I believe that it should be highly considered by our task force. I appreciate what the task force is doing. I do want to urge all the members of the task force to realize we should open as soon as possible. I mean, I think our citizens have learned the behaviors of social distancing. I've been blessed that my business, my personal business, is open. I've seen a major change through this. I hate to call it an experiment. It's not an experiment, it's a lie. But y'all, there's a major change in how our citizens are acting, how businesses that are open are acting. And I believe that Lubbock is doing a really good job, not only learning social distancing, obviously wearing facial coverings. I'm amazed how many people come in my business with facial coverings on and adhere to the store's rules. I believe that the guidelines should be met as we do open up, but I urge everyone to look at this SASA 3.0 last page 16 document. Workers providing personal and household goods, comma, repair, comma, and maintenance. It's time for us to take action, get Lubbock back open. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Mr. Massengill, you want to add anything to that, or do you just take that as council?
Thank you, Mayor. No, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. All information is important. We've discussed the changes as it relates to the auto dealers, but we have not discussed the portion of the CISA document that you referenced, and we'll be sure and take a deep dive into that, as we agree with you. It's time to find a safe and responsible way to open us back up.
Thank you, Mr. Massengill. Ms. Joy? Ms. Joy, I believe you're muted.
You're muted, Latrell.
We have been advised that those specific businesses or services, in other words, hairdressers, nail, barbershops, tattoo parlors, massage parlors, were specifically set out by the governor as being closed. That makes it very difficult for the city of Lubbock because he was very specific on those. Other retail business, we've been advised that we can reopen. So I think a lot of us have had lots of information from our citizens, and I appreciate the fact that they are responding, and I'm very worried because some of those are the smallest of smallest businesses. But I do want the public to know that because the governor specifically set those out and said they're closed, it has caused a problem for the city to be able to reopen those.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Mr. Griffith, it sounds like you want to add something to that, to your comment.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Joy really wasn't referencing those professions. What I'm referencing is when it says personal and household goods, that opens up a lot. Is soap a personal good? I would say yes. Do a lot of small boutique shops sell soap that also sell apparel? Those folks, I believe, should be open today because it wasn't about apparel. It's just like Walmart. Walmart's open for grocery, but they can sell apparel. But I believe a personal good is soap, and there's a lot of boutique stores that sell soap. That's just one example. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Okay, let's go to Ms. Patterson Harris. Sheila, anything on your mind this morning? Looks like Sheila's good. Juan, what about you? You got comments or questions on what's been presented?
Yes, sir. More of a comment, Mayor. My concern is for the public safety, which is where we need to be looking at. Opening up small businesses, I'm all in favor of that. You know, we keep talking about small businesses, but we fail to mention the impact that these small businesses are having on the community. For example, the actual working staff at these small businesses. Now they've got some financial obligations as well, and not for short-sightedness, but we fail to mention the rest of the community that's being impacted by these small businesses being closed. I want to open up small business, but let's not be hasty about that decision. We've got the task force is already in place. Hopefully they will come up with a with some oversight as to how we're going to do this. I don't want to open up and then a few weeks later we run into another spike, which may be even more difficult to correct. We just can't be hasty in this. And again, I'm all in favor of opening up small businesses. We just got to be real careful as to how and the steps we do to make this happen safely, not at the risk of our community. That's my comment, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chattis. Let's see, Mr. Christian.
Good morning, everyone. Mr. Mayor, you know, I told you previously that the way I would couch this, that I feel like I created my own virtual Lubbock Economic Recovery Committee using social media and posting three posts. The first one was a video of me making a presentation, the same presentation I made a week ago at council meeting. The second post, I asked, how would you open Lubbock using smart science and smart sense? The third one, I asked, which frightens you most, COVID-19 or economic collapse? Combined, I've had over 900 responses. And some of them were very simple, some of them yes, no, maybe, but there was a tremendous number of very deep dive, good information by business owners, small business owners, of how they would suggest that we get them to open up. And I think it was very good information that I wish that our task force would take a look at, because I'm with Councilman Griffith that we need to open up ASAP. But I also would ask that, and I believe that Councilman Massengale has broken his committee down into a couple of subcategories, if I'm not mistaken, and one of them is retail. I'm going to take that concept that he's talking about, and I'm going to use an old-fashioned term called dry goods stores. And I think that's what Councilman Griffith is talking in reference to, those businesses that do not serve food, do not serve drink, and do not provide personal services like the ones that Ms. Joy suggested. Those are the ones like the Outdoorsman's, Piper, Building Blocks, Stems, some of those other ones that have suggested that they would like to been very vocal about getting open. I personally do not think there's any reason why that subcategory that's part of the recovery committee, we could put some things together in place ASAP, and theoretically they could open tomorrow, because we all know that many of those rules and regulations that we would ask them to abide by would not be a whole lot different than what some of the big box stores are using right now, especially as you would reference a Home Depot and Lowe's situation. The comments that I got from those 900 people, they're willing to do whatever we ask them to do so they can get open. My feeling is the first group that we could get open literally tomorrow is that category that I've named dry goods. There's a lot of them, and there's a lot of them in my district, and I've talked to a number of them over the phone. I also shared with you, Mayor, a program that was brought to my attention by one of the people on the social media, and that's Shop Safe Lafayette, Louisiana. I looked at that and I thought it was very smart, very simple, and it did once again reflect some of the rules and regulations that we're already applying to the big box stores. My recommendation is, and I hope that we see this next Tuesday, is to take that subcategory that, once again, I'm going to call dry goods stores, get them open ASAP, and we could use them as a beta site. We can use them as how it can and can't be done, and then move some of those things that they're using to our restaurants and well as our personal service businesses. I think it makes sense. Also, I saw on the news today that we were going to talk about face masks. This is my personal feeling. If I was a business owner of one of those dry goods stores, I would recommend that.
Hold on, Mr. Christian. I don't know where the news came up with that, but that's not posted on our agenda. You can comment on it if you can comment on it, but that's not posted on our agenda. I just want to make sure that's clear.
Okay. Well, I was going to mention it anyway in reference to these.
Okay. Let's keep our comment. I'd prefer you keep your comments to Mr. Atkinson's comments or Mr. and Mr. Massengale's, and maybe you should pose a question or how are you considering face masks? Because Ms. Joy and Mr. Massengale's are right, or Mr. Massengale are right in the middle of the task force effort, and I'd be glad for them to answer that. But
well, I'm not going to mention a face mask because I guess there was some misinformation.
Okay,
I thought
all right, thank you.
Up. So
Thank you.
that's a side note. But you
Okay.
see where I'm going with my
Certainly,
comment.
yes. I completely do. Yes.
Yeah, well, forget the face masks, because since it wasn't on the agenda and that was, looked like a rogue comment about that it was might be. So that's where I'm looking at. So I'm hoping that we at least have something to rock solid on Tuesday that goes beyond these, the shops and something that relates to restaurants. But I do believe that we could get this subcategory open later or sooner rather than later, based upon, and really the model that I shared with you of Shop Safe Louisiana. And I'll shut and have a conversation.
Yes, Mr. Mascio, you want to make any comments on or any clarifications?
Well, several items that you touched on were all discussed in our committee. I'm sure that Ms. Joy will agree with me that I think you'll be very impressed with the work the group will deliver on Tuesday. I think it will be very well thought out. It's being reviewed by our medical and science group. Again, my term has been a safe and responsible opening for Lubbock, Texas, and we're headed in the right place. You're muted, Dan.
Do we have
Yes.
has there been discussion of when we might be able to open?
Yes, we have many options. Keep in mind that there's some flexibility between now and April 30th on those things that are not called out specifically in the governor's order. Those are things that we don't have flexibility on, but those things that are not called out specifically are things that we could consider, and those things could, if it was the pleasure of the council, those things could open before April 30th.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Joy.
Mr. Massengill, I think it would be helpful for people to know that, yes, that these businesses that have not been called out could open, but the consideration that the committee is looking at is what are the guidelines, what are the protocols that are going to take place, because that speaks to Mr. Chavez' concern about public safety.
Yeah.
And that's not lost on the committee at all, but neither is it lost that many of us want the reopening sooner than later.
Yeah, great point. There are, considering a litany of guidelines as it applies to those businesses that we might have the flexibility to open soon and those that would come after the governor's order has expired. So they have taken already a very deep dive into what it would look like over the next few weeks.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Passion-Harris.
I have a question for Mr. Atkinson, please. With regard to the funds that have been earmarked for CDBG, ESG, do we have any word as to when we will have our hands on that and the guidelines to help us in how to utilize those?
I have not received an update on where that set of guidelines is. I will check as quick as we're off this meeting and let you know.
Thank you, Mr. Atkinson. It's a good question, Ms. Passion-Harris. Okay, before we move to our second item this morning, I just want to thank everybody for their input and I'm particularly thankful for the work that Robert and Steve are leading and Latrell's participating in, along with 20 other citizens, to give us some counsel. I remind everyone that that's just advice for us. We're the ones that have to make the decisions. We'll get that information by end of they should have their work done, at least the very first part of their work done by the end of this week. And we should be able to consider it and take action at our meeting on Tuesday. I think it's incumbent upon us to get business restarted while doing it safely. And I've said that a number of times, and that's where I'll continue to stay. I'm pleased with where some of our health numbers are. We'll talk more in our press conference tomorrow morning in more detail about that, including some graphs, and we're continuing to update our information. I know that several of you have been asking for more detailed demographic information. I think we'll have that ready tomorrow also. And I think that just helps tell the story more as to what's going on in our community, where there's, as we know more, we need to share more. Okay.
Mr.
next
Mayor,
item.
I have a quick question
Yes, ma'am.
that's just come up when and as I'm looking over my notes as I make here with regard to some of the personal services that Mr. Griffith was referencing to. Would that any way, could we look at that, including services like counseling services, substance abuse treatment, and things like that? Because you have lots of groups of people who are having to forego that because of what we're dealing with, and being having worked in the juvenile justice area and still having contact with those folks, that's definitely a concern. Those things are not being able to be provided to a lot of.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Mr. Atkinson speak to that. I believe that there's a little bit of good news in that. Jarrett, can you add to that, please, or answer that question?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. The city has, from the very first declaration, allowed the counseling services to continue. We feel that that fits into healthcare. We had numerous providers contact us. We've asked them to not have groups greater than 10 and to maintain, their proper social distance and good practice. If there's some that are choosing not to do that, that's not as a result of the city's orders. They're free to do it today. Just do it safely.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Atkinson. Okay, council. We'll move now to item 1.3. It's a update on the Unified Development Code and impact fees. This was put on the agenda at the request of questions that a number of you had, and specifically the Mayor Pro Tem and I have had some conversations with members of our development community, and I thought it was appropriate that we get an update from staff as to where we are, and if there are any changes to our timelines. I think it's important that we understand that and that the citizens understand that. So, Mr. Atkinson.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. We're going to go over the Unified Development Code update first, and then second, we'll do the impact fee update. Council item 2.2 on your agenda tonight is a resolution that is that next step as it relates to the impact fee update. So, Mr. Yearwood, if you could get Mr. Isham ready to come on screen for us.
He should be coming up, sir.
Thank you. And there he is. Good morning, Mr. Isham.
Good morning. How is everybody?
Okay. Brian, please take us through your update on the UDC.
Sure. Here we go. So I'll just take a few minutes to go through our timeline and updated timelines for the Unified Development Code. We'll start with the benchmarks that we've met so far. This includes the adoption of the comprehensive plan in 2018, the contract being awarded to KKC in early May of 2019, the first 3 site visits that have been conducted, as well as the review of Module 1 that we received in February. Right now, we've been working with our consultants and in contact with them quite a bit. They've assured us that there is no change to our timeline as far as when we can expect these modules. We are expecting Module 2 to be submitted to us by the end of this week, so Friday. The only thing that has changed is the site visit associated with Module 2. As you guys can recall, it was to be held this week, but we've postponed it. We haven't set a date or a week yet. It should be sometime in late May or early June. But again, that's the only thing that's changing. We are expecting module 3 and site visit 5 again in August, with module 4 in October and the site visit 6 in November of 2020. As far as the adoption process, again, nothing has changed. We would be expecting our full UDC draft for review beginning in January of 2021, with site visit 7 and Planning and Zoning Commission hearings in February, and then site visit 8 and City Council public hearings in March. With that, if you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, so Mr. Isom, if I've got it right, the UDC is still on track with the timeframes that we've previously communicated. Is that correct?
That is correct. The only thing again that's changed is site visit 5 that we're looking at either in May or in June.
Thank you very much. Council, any questions on this one?
Mr. Mayor, I don't have a question. I have a request.
Yes.
I know that things have been silent, but I would that we make sure and ensure that we are communicating things to the citizens as we continue to work our way through this, that we provide information on whatever website, Facebook, Pigeon, or whatever, that we provide them to citizens in the community so that they are aware as to how this thing is moving and what direction we're heading in. We were slow start on that to begin. And since it's been brought to our attention that citizens don't want us to do that, we want to make sure that we continue being transparent and communicative to the citizens.
We will definitely do that. And one thing, our consultants, with everything that's going on, they've been conducting a lot of virtual meetings. So along with in-person meetings, we're going to explore some of those capabilities with them as well.
Mr. Isom, I just encourage you to keep us posted on that so we can use our communication channels to our constituents. I think that would be very important for us to help with that effort to get involvement.
Will do.
Any other questions on UDC before we move to impact fees? Okay, Mr. Isom, please continue.
Okay, Mayor, I might interject. We're going to bring up Mr. Mike Keenum, your city engineer. Recall the impact fee program is being done with an appointed group called your Capital Improvement Advisory Committee. I'm filling time while Mark brings Mike up on the screen for us.
You know, City Manager, I thought Mr. Isom did such a great job at moving through that so quickly. I thought we might assign him a different task today. So,
yes, sir, I agree. And I really like the backdrop in Studio Isom there.
yeah,
I'm not sure where that is, but it looks great. Mr. Yearwood, do we have Mr. Keenum ready to come?
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
I believe I'm here. Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Morning, Mr. Keenum.
I've just got a single slide to share this morning. There we go. I think y'all can see that now. And so really everything to the left of the green bubble that you see there is things that we've already done. The report for the land use assumptions and the capacity plans or the capital improvement plans, that was recommended to move forward by our committee on March 9th. As you know, we had intended to have the first public hearing the end of March, and then we moved that to April 14th with all the COVID stuff that happened, the postings that shifted everything out. And one of the things that y'all are talking about today is to set the first public hearing for May 28th, I believe is what the intent is. So that has obviously shifted us to the right a couple of months. And so as you look at that schedule, that public hearing in May, at May 28th, if approved today, is simply for the land use assumption and the capacity improvement plan. Those are the only pieces that we're looking at. We're not adopting impact fees at this time. That is just the first step of the public hearing process. And so with this timeline, really the intent would be the second public hearing to be towards the end of July, July 28th, is what we've shown on this. That allows our committee to have a couple of months to process the final report, input from that public hearing at the end of May, and get the finalized report and recommendations to you to do the second public hearing July 28th, and then potentially do the first reading of ordinance then, and then August 11th, do the second reading of the ordinance to potentially adopt impact fees, or at least to take action one way or the other. So we have pushed out a little bit, and it's still a pretty aggressive schedule to get to the finish line here, but I think this is doable. I visited with Thomas Payne, the chair of the committee, and he feels like this is fairly reasonable. It is aggressive, and they've got a lot of work to do between now and July 28th. But this May 28th was the one that was originally scheduled for March 31st, I believe. And so that has shifted us out a couple of months to the right. And obviously we've been mindful of what's going on with the coronavirus and trying to recognize that and the impact of that, but also keep this ball rolling forward. I mean, that's what we're trying to do. And Thomas is committed to doing that as well. And so are we as staff. With that, I would take any questions.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Keenum. Let's start with Ms. Patterson Harris.
Mr. Keenum, I have a question. What has the participation or attendance been like with regard to citizens in the community outside of developers? I know that they were probably busting the doors down, but outside of those folks, has our participation been like, an input from just ordinary old Joe Blow in the community?
It has been minimal. After we did the February work session meeting to council, that really engaged the building community and the development community. When we put some preliminary numbers up, that really got them involved. And so that conversation has been going well. But as far as the general public, we have not had much input from them. You know, the committee represents several different areas of our community. And so they've talked to several folks. We've talked to realtors. We've done some of those things. But as far as just general attendance at the meeting, it has been minimal.
Yeah, I would like to encourage and seek more participation. While those members of the committee do represent specific areas, we can't always get everybody represented. So to ensure that we don't miss anyone, I would really like to for us to make sure that folks know about the meetings. I believe that there's one this Friday. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am. There's one at 10 o'clock Friday morning. It'll be a Zoom meeting, and that is posted on the city's website. We're looking to see about getting that posted on Facebook.
Okay, I really want to make sure that we do that and provide all opportunities that we can. We get hammered on the head for folks saying that they didn't know or weren't a part. And if we get hammered on our head, it's our own doing, especially if we don't get that information out there. So I appreciate getting that out. And I've made some contacts and been contacted about citizens who actually want to, at least if for nothing else, to listen in and hear what that process looks like. So I appreciate that.
And just to add to that, we kind of adopted the same strategy that y'all did for council meeting, of that if they want to speak at the public comment, they have to submit in writing the day before. Since we've got a morning meeting, they have to have those comments submitted to us by 4 o'clock on Thursday to be able to be read into the meeting on Friday morning.
Yeah, I saw that. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Patterson Harris. Thank you, Mr. Keenum. Council, any questions for Mr. Keenum? Mr.
Yes,
Mayor
Mayor.
Pro Tem? Oh, yes, Ms. Joy.
Just quickly, Mr. Keenum, briefly tell the public why we're talking about, quote, impact fees. I can tell you there are a lot of people who don't have a clue what an impact fee is.
And we actually put a graphic up on our website. I don't have that easily accessible. What's on there says what are impact fees, and it's an infographic, but basically it's a one-time fee that new development would pay to contribute to their impact to the overall system. As new development comes in, they build interior to their subdivisions. An easy example, they build interior to that, but the infrastructure, the arterial roadways, the major water and sewer pipes, the treatment plants, all of that is funded by ratepayers and taxpayers and not the new development. And so impact fee is it's a tool in the toolbox. It's not to fund it 100%. It is a portion to bring in additional revenues to help the city build the infrastructure needed to provide the same infrastructure service to these new developments that the existing development has. It allows growth to pay for growth, and it helps the city to fund those projects that we need to be able to service that new growth.
And are impact fees provided for in state legislation?
Yes, ma'am. Local Government Code Chapter 395 is what established that. That's been around in Texas since 1987. So it is not new to the state of Texas. It's new to West Texas and to the city of Lubbock for sure.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, good questions. Good clarification there. Thank you. Okay, so I think that the item, when we get to our action item on our agenda tonight, it will be just for setting the May 28th meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Atkinson?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay. Okay. All right, council, anything before we go into, before we convene our regular session of our meeting? Okay. So I'll, it is 10:51, and I'll call the regular session of the Lubbock City Council to order. We have two items today. Item 2.1 is a resolution from the city manager's office. Item 2.2 is the resolution regarding the public hearing that we just discussed. Why don't we go and take care of that one first, since it's fresh on our minds? And is there a motion to begin consideration of item 2.2?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Christian. Thank you, Ms. Joy. Mr. Atkinson, if you would just one time again, please remind everyone what the details of this action. Council, by the way, this is on page, I'm not looking, I don't see a page number. I guess it's page 5 of it's in our agenda package. Mine's not numbered, but Mr. Atkinson, remind us again the details of this motion or this item.
Certainly, Mayor. Item 2.2 is a resolution. The resolution is specifically setting the date for the public hearing. This is where land use assumptions, all of the numeric and financial data will be presented to the public for comment. So certainly we take the guidance to heart. We want people to participate in this. This resolution sets that hearing to be on May 28th, 2020. We are required to have a 30-day run-up to this one, so this is how it matches. May 28th, 2020 at 5 p.m. to be held at Citizens Tower, 1314 Avenue K, Lubbock, Texas. So as a reminder, this is step before this item will come to council for consideration. This is the public presentation. This is the public comment. This is our experts in our committee speaking to the public as they come out of that. Ultimately, then your committee will feed back to the council the action items that Mr. Keenum discussed beginning in July.
Thank you, Mr. Atkinson. Council, are there any questions about this item? Any comments? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve item 2.2, please say aye.
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 Any opposed by that same sign? Okay. That motion passes 7-0. Okay, let's go back to item 2.1. This is a resolution concerning participation by the Lubbock Economic Development Alliance in conjunction with the South Plains Association of Governments in a revolving loan fund program to provide financial assistance to small businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. The resolution concerns this participation. We were provided some information last night. Council, it looks, you should have seen something like this. And in order to begin discussion on this, is there a motion?
So moved, Mayor. Move to
Second.
approve.
Thank you, Mr. Maskill. Thank you, Mr. Christian. Mr. Atkinson.
Thank you, Mayor. If I might, and just to keep our actions straight today, would you mind reading the supplemental agenda, which is 2.1.1? It is the same wording, but substituting Market Lubbock, Inc. So it's a two-sided program, and we'd like to have both before
I'm
you
sorry.
today.
My bad. So do we need to consider, yeah, let me reread this. Item 2.1.1, this was the supplement to our meeting that we got last night. Resolution from the city manager's office, consider a resolution concerning participation by Market Lubbock, Inc., in conjunction with South Plains Association of Governments, or SPAG, in a revolving loan fund to provide financial assistance to small businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Atkinson, let me get Mr. Satterwhite for just a second. Mr. Satterwhite, can we consider these two items together?
Yes, sir, you can.
Okay, Mr. Massingale, would you allow this? Would you amend your motion to that effect, please?
Yes, I would, Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Christian, you okay with that from a second standpoint? Okay, so we got a motion and a second for items 2.1 and 2.11. Back to you, Mr. Atkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have Ms. Brianna Girardi and I believe Mr. John Osborne. John, are you on the line?
Yes, sir, I am. Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Okay, Mayor, Council, with your permission, I'd like to have Mr. Osborne walk us quickly through the overview. That is the document. That is the document that was distributed yesterday evening. John and his team at LEDA and at Market Lubbock have moved this program very quickly. It's an opportunity to try to get some assistance to our local small businesses. So John, if you would take it away.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. City Manager. We at LEDA and Market Lubbock have been watching the situation with our economy evolve over the last month to 6 weeks, and been paying particularly close attention to how the SBA funds were going to be administered and the impact that they have. I'll be perfectly honest that there's nothing that any of us in our own community, including our city government, could do that would be as substantial as what the SBA could offer. And we wanted to see how that was going to impact in the spots that it was potentially going to miss. As things evolved, Eddie McBride at the Chamber of Commerce did a survey of various member businesses and found that 3 out of 10 were not participating in the SBA process. I think some of that is because of how small our businesses are. By definition, the SBA believes that small businesses are companies with less than 500 employees. And that actually is the bulk of our companies in Lubbock, Texas. And many of them are extremely small, somewhere between 5 and 50 employees. And so I think the survey that the Chamber of Commerce did is very representative of our community, in that many of them didn't have the manpower or the understanding of how to get through that process. We've also been hearing from our banking community that many of our small businesses were struggling with some working capital challenges. And so if I could, I'm going to share my screen real quick and move over to our PowerPoint. Our board for both LEDA and Market Lubbock took up yesterday and approved a program that would what we're calling the Support Lubbock Fund. And LEDA and Market Lubbock both are dipping into our reserves and using some excess funds in Market Lubbock related to our downtown area, our grant program there, to put together $1 million out of each organization into a fund over at SPAG. So a total of $2 million that SPAG would help us administer. One of our great partners, SPAG, they have since the early 1990s administered a revolving loan fund that was established by the EDA back then to help out our small businesses. The approval process for that small business loan fund is about 45 days. And working with Tim Pierce at SPAG, he and I both recognized that would not work for our situation here in our community, given the economic situation. And SPAG, knowing also how we ended up developing this program, the way that we're going to administer this is actually to have a separate fund created over at SPAG with this $2 million so that they can administer it properly and keep it separate from this existing revolving loan fund. I want to just kind of talk a little bit about what this $2 million, the Support Lubbock Fund, is going to do, and how some of our terms and conditions, and talk about loan versus grant process. We know that in many of the communities around the state that are offering up grant programs, they're finding that there's just not enough money to go around to every single business. And so the grants are going very, very quickly, and they're not being able to do very significant amounts. And so the impact of that is so challenging. So what we've actually developed with this program is to really work with our small business community that's established, that's been in business at least a couple of years, that are located within the city limits of Lubbock, and that have been directly impacted by this, the pandemic and the economic challenges as a result. And so we've set up a tiered system that companies with gross revenues in 2019 of at least $100,000 and at a maximum of $5 million could apply for assistance. Those that were with gross revenues between 100,000 and 500,000 would be eligible for up to $20,000. Those with gross revenues between 500,000 and 2.5 million would be eligible for up to $40,000. And those with gross revenues between 2.5 million and 5 million would be eligible for up to $60,000. The primary use of those funds would be for working capital. We understand that working capital is a bit of a broad base definition. And so we've given some general terms, but we've asked SPAG to be accommodating for our business community, that if there are some items that they believe would be essential for our business to remain established, that we would, as long as it's kind of in that general category of working capital, we would continue to allow for those things to be loaned out for. The terms and conditions actually start as a loan. And we think that this is a very important part of the program, so that we have those companies that are in true need of assistance would have the opportunity to step up. One of the challenges with the PPP program with the SBA was not only could you only dip into one fund and not into multiple funds, but secondly, it was a relatively easy program to get converted from a loan to a grant, and therefore had a tremendous number of companies actually step up to the plate to get funds. Many of our smaller, much smaller businesses that we're targeting with this between $100,000 and $5 million in gross revenues really is that sweet spot that was missed by the PPP program. So we're starting off this as a fund that would be used as a revolving loan fund. So as payments are paid back to SPAG, it would then be able to be loaned out in the future for other businesses as well. But the terms on this would be a short term, so 5 years maximum at a 4% interest rate, which is a great interest rate, but not necessarily just free money at 1 or less than 1% interest. It would be one loan per small business, but if a company has taken advantage of some of the SBA, they would still be eligible for this particular loan. It would be on a first come, first served basis. There is an application that must be filled out and some documents that must be turned in. And once all of that data is in, then they get added into the queue. So they have to have everything in order to be considered by the loan committee. I will highlight the fact that there is a loan forgiveness option on this program, and we think that this is a key component to this revolving loan fund. And that is that the way that we're going to work with our companies on this program is that they'll take the loan out and they will pay interest-only payments between now and the end of the first quarter 2021. We need them to go ahead and continue paying those interest-only payments on $25,000. That would end up being $83 a month, and we think that that's acceptable, a dollar amount that a business might have to pay to have a short-term loan. They would begin paying principal. They can pay principal amounts beforehand, but they are required to start paying principal starting in the second quarter of next year. We will measure them at the end of the first quarter to look at their 2020 gross revenues. And if their 2020 gross revenues fall by a minimum of 35%, then they will be eligible for a 50% loan forgiveness. If by chance their 2020 gross revenues fall by greater than 50%, we will actually forgive the entire loan and it will become a grant. And again, this is one of those key components that we know our companies are hurting dramatically. And if their total gross revenues are down by that significant amount, then a loan is not really helping them. They need the grant. And so we like this kind of combination of loan and grant program so that we really truly target those companies that need this kind of assistance and hopes of trying to keep them in business until the economy can come back. If our companies go out of business, then that's a real major impact on not just our economy, but also on each individual family that with employees that are there. And so if we can keep them in business for just a little longer, that is the main goal of this, to bridge until the economy begins to rebound. There is an application process that each company will go through. That application is with you all, with the City Council's approval today. We will go live on the SPAG website with an application that you can download and fill out with all the required documents. Return that to supportlubbockfund@spag.org. And there will be a closing process that takes place. I've been so thankful to be working with SPAG. They've done a phenomenal job, and they believe that they can keep the fees associated with this at a very, very minimum amount. And they also think that they can get this each of these loans closed, hopefully in a 14-day period, or potentially even less, depending on certain circumstances. So they've significantly cut down the approval process in hopes of deploying this money as soon as possible. Again, we'll have information on the LEDA website, and we'll be promoting this significantly. The Chamber of Commerce has offered a webinar to SPAG and ourselves to promote this afternoon at 3 o'clock. They can go to the Chamber website and register for more information to do the Zoom meeting. And then we'll have information on our website. We'll also have information on the SPAG website about this program. SPAG has also already started reaching out to the banking community so that the bankers can talk to their small business owners that they lend to, that they know need some additional assistance right now, and hopes of getting the word out. And I would encourage each of you all, as you begin to communicate with your constituents, that you also discuss this program for those small business owners, if you would please. I want to switch over to a couple of other things. This is the application here. We are getting a couple of additional pieces of information in this. We are asking the number of jobs that the company had on March 1st of this year, and then as of the date of the application. And we think this will help give us some additional data as to what's taking place in our community. We will also, through this process, be looking at the NAICS codes, which helps identify the type of business that's being affected, so that we can gather additional data on the community that we're in, the business community that we're going to end up assisting through the deployment of these funds. And then finally, we are sending out a marketing flyer. This is something that our team has put together that helps explain the program just a little bit, and giving kind of clear detail information about what the loan can be used for and the amounts that you're eligible for. We'll have this downloaded on our website. We'll send this out to anybody that's requesting. My team at both LEDA, Market Lubbock, and Visit Lubbock are taking this information that you've seen today and actually having conversations with all of our businesses that we deal with, and sending this out to those that are in need. So whether it's a hotel or a nonprofit or a for-profit business, whether it's manufacturing or retail or a restaurant, this program, if they fall within the $100,000 in revenues in 2019, and they've been in business 2 years, from a minimum of 100,000 to a maximum of 5 million, they will be eligible, no matter if they've already received additional funds from our federal government. I hope this has helped address any questions that you might have. We're we are very excited about this and and we're ready to get this deployed. I want to give a lot of credit to my team for how quickly they've been able to identify a great opportunity to put together, but also our partners for everyone stepping to the table to help out. SPAG has just been incredible to work with. They understand how to administer loans like this, and they know how to do it quickly. Our team on LIDA and Market Lubbock and Visit Lubbock is not used to doing loans. We're more used to doing grants. And so that's one reason why we wanted to partner with SPAG. SPAG is also hopeful they can use these funds to leverage to get additional funds in the future from the EDA. But the soonest that those funds could potentially be deployed would be the end of May or 1st of June. And that's best case scenarios. We just felt that we needed to move sooner rather than later and get this money deployed to our small business community to help them out. Be glad to answer any questions that you all might have on this.
Then Mr.
Yes, Mr.
Mr. Osborne, thank you very much for that. Ms. Girardi, I want to go to Mr. Christian. I want him to, I'm going to introduce him in a second, but before we do, Brianna, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mayor. I do not have anything to add other than I've spent several weeks having lots of conversations with business owners that are going to be able to benefit from this program. So just really appreciate LIDA and Market Lubbock and Visit Lubbock and your teams for working so hard to put this together. It's going to benefit a lot of people, and we're excited to be a part of it. Thanks,
Brianna. I agree with you. I echo your comments. I'll save some of mine for later. But yesterday, Mr. Osborne's board had a emergency meeting. It overlapped with the electric utility board meeting, and I asked Mr. Christian to not go to EUB and to be at the LIDA Market Lubbock meeting. He's sort of championed an idea, but very much like this for several weeks. Always the advocate for small businesses. So Randy, why don't you maybe give us a little flavor from the meeting yesterday with the LIDA board, your perspective on this before we open this up for other comments and questions. Randy?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I do want to echo Mr. Osborne's accolades to his staff, both his staff and SPAG, but also think that wanted to mention Mr. Osborne, if I'm not mistaken, Jana Johnson was instrumental in making this happen as well. So I want to give her kudos. The board meeting was really kind of inspiring, if you want to be honest about it, because, you know, this first came up a couple of weeks ago when I was concerned about some of the downtown grants and that we needed to find something that we could help businesses across the community. And folks on both sides on Market Lubbock, LIDA, and SPAG jumped on it right away. And now we have what we're getting ready to vote on this morning. One important point I think that we need to bring up that Mr. Osborne, and we had talked about this yesterday, is who will be eligible for this program. And it will be, just want to reiterate, this will be for businesses just inside the city limits of Lubbock, Texas, or that's our recommendation. I think that, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, but there are several other council members that I have you know, they have offered the same sort of feeling, if you will. But SPAG originally, as Mr. Osborne said, SPAG was hoping that there would be some additional funds, federal funds that could come into play, but they're being very slow played, not of any, not of their being, but we hope that SPAG, well, we know that SPAG will continue to try to get those funds in play in the very near future, so we can expand the opportunities for business to apply for some help outside the Lubbock city limits. So I just wanted to make sure and let our other council members know that that's really was kind of at least a number of our fellow council members that agreed that we should keep the applications for a business inside the city limits of Lubbock, Texas. So with that said, Mayor, I'm just very excited, and I know there's lots of people that will be banging on the doors ASAP to facilitate this funds, because as we all know, there's a lot of businesses that are hurting hurting very much so. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Christian. I appreciate that. Open the floor for other questions or comments. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Osborne, please give kudos to your entire board and your staff. This is a fantastic program. I really appreciate how quick y'all put this together. The public needs to understand that there's several members of our council that are members of the South Plains Association of Governments. And we understand what they do, and to the point that they can do the logistics on these loans is, I think, a great partnership. So I appreciate what you've done and your board, and using South Plains Association of Governments capabilities. And Mr. Pierce needs kudos to this also, but thank you very much for getting this going. And I do agree with Mr. Christian. It should be City of Lubbock applicants.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Other comments or
Mayor.
questions? Mr. Massagill.
Thank you, Mayor. John, my thanks go out to your board on this as well. This, the way that y'all pivoted on this and created resources for small business is great. How our community utilizes the PPP and supplemental programs like this is going to determine how quickly that our economy begins to churn again and small businesses get back to what we consider would be a new normal. So this is very important work, and I'm grateful for what you've done.
Thank you, Mr. Massagill. Other comments?
Mr.
Ms.
Mayor.
Joy? Ms. Joy?
Obviously, I think it's a good program. I have a couple of concerns. The first come, first serve, I'm not sure if that means what it says. And the other was the comment that was made that a business could have also received federal funds under the PPE. I see this program as for some of these smaller businesses who could never have qualified and got left at the gate. And sometimes just getting the documentation is hard for a small business because they don't, they're not large. They don't do this on a monthly basis, sometimes quarterly, sometimes they don't do it every 6 months. And I want to be sure that those deserving smaller businesses don't get pushed out because someone already has a packet that they presented for PPE, and they're just going to submit that. The other word that's used is eligible for, and I hope that means that there's some discretion from the people who are administering this, that just because you ask for 60,000, perhaps you might not get that amount. So I guess, Mr. Osborne, could you speak to some of those concerns and questions?
Yes, ma'am. I'm going to share my screen one more time and just bring up the application. I want to do that primarily to show how different it is than the federal one was. This application form is, by most accounts, relatively simple and easy to fill out. We recognize that most of the small businesses that we're targeting don't have CFOs on staff. They don't have people that are dedicated to just filling out government forms. And so we wanted something very simple to put together. So I know I'm scrolling through this just a bit quickly, but it's just 2 pages. And it asks for some very simple information. And so we did that on purpose so that we knew that the companies that we were targeting would not necessarily have the ability, both in time and understanding of some of the major government forms. We heard from many of our bankers as we were putting this together and we were getting their opinions that was a real frustration amongst many of our small businesses with the federal documents. Secondly, we also understand from our banking community that even though some of our small businesses applied for some of those funds, number one, they may not have gotten any. And number two, they may not have gotten what they needed. And so we've established this fund in a manner that is really tries to target those companies that need funds, no matter what the reason is for, whether they didn't get enough from the federal funds or they didn't get any. And we do say eligible for in those different amounts, because not everyone that is of a certain size is going to want to take out a loan for that maximum amount. They may need just something short term. They may need something just for the next couple of weeks while they wait on their PPP to come in. And so they just need a bit of relief. And so we've tried to establish the sizes so that they're the tiers, so that the loan grant amount would be appropriate for the amount of revenues that the company is generally experiencing over the last couple of years. But we also recognize that the bulk of the companies that we think are going to be applying for these funds are not going to have had any assistance from the federal government at all. But we also tried to make this to be as open as possible for all of our existing companies in our community to be, we were trying to not be exclusive from them. And then finally, I just want to say that we put the cap on there such that, remember the main purpose of this fund is to try to keep our business in business. We need them operating as we try to exit out of this. And many of our companies that have revenues greater than 5 million, yes, they are hurting. They might have furloughed some people. They might have even laid off some people. And we know that they're hurting from an economic standpoint. But the likelihood of success in them exiting out of this and being still in business is generally pretty high. So this much more targeted 100,000 to 5 million, this is the sweet spot of our community that if we don't help them now, there's a high likelihood that they're not going to be able to be there when the economy starts to recover. And that's where they need a little bit of assistance. And so we understand that 20, 40, and 60,000, depending on the eligibility, is to some businesses a great amount, and to others is not very much at all. When you start doing the math on this, $2 million gets taken real quick, much like the PPP does at the federal level, given the sheer volume of businesses that were eligible for that. So we're trying our best to help out our community. We've been making daily calls to all of our business community, not just the companies we work with, to find out who's hiring, who's struggling, who needs this. And my team right now is in the process of waiting for your vote so that they can deploy emails to each of their contacts that they've been working with to say that there's a fund that's eligible. So we do intend to get this out as soon as possible. And we appreciate the Chamber of Commerce so much for highlighting it to their members, and to also get the word out with a webinar today, because we know that these businesses are really struggling.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Mr. Chavez.
Thank you. Mr. Osborne, you said that the phone calls are being made at this point to inform the public about the opportunities coming up?
So we recognize that the need to act now is happening. I mean, we need to do something now. We are being, I would say, appropriate in that we waited for our board to vote, and we're waiting for you all to vote before we send information out about the program. But the sales teams on both Leda and Visit Lubbock and Market Lubbock, they understand we've got to get the word out right now that there is a fund available. We are specifically targeting, with SPAG's help, the banking community, our loan community that works daily with small businesses to know which ones are struggling and to encourage them to apply. And then with the assistance of the Chamber of Commerce, targeting the bulk of their members are obviously business owners, small business owners, and we want to help target that way. We will have a press release that goes out after your vote, and on the off chance that any members of the press are not attending the council meeting at the moment, And we're obviously happy to do interviews and the such as well. We intend to get the word out on this, and we're trying every means possible to specifically target those companies that are hurting. We've been making phone calls for 6 weeks now to our business community, asking what their challenges are, and we've got notes on them such that we can reply to them now with information about this program and encourage them to apply those that have said that it's necessary.
One more question, Mr. Osborne. You said the list. How was this list compiled or composed?
Of the
Where did
business
they
community?
come from?
I'm sorry, are you talking about the list of the business community?
Yes, sir. The phone calls you initiated.
Mhm.
How was that list composed? Where did the list come from?
It's come from a variety of sources. Some of it is companies we know. Some of it is members of the Chamber of Commerce. And some of it is just knowing what companies are out there and reaching out to them that aren't necessarily members of the Chamber or big enough to do it. That doesn't mean we will hit them all. There's about 7,000 businesses just in the city limits of Lubbock. And so not every business is going to be on our list by any stretch of the means. And that's why we were asking for multiple ways to get the word out about this.
Excuse me. That's where I was headed with this, because we want to make sure we reach out to the small business person out there that may not be on that list that you're talking about. We want to make sure that the word goes out. And usually, and I don't like to use the word usually or typically, but the really ma and pa corner stores that are really hurting, I don't want them to be left out. So it's a daunting task. It's impossible to reach everyone.
Agree.
But we got to make sure that the word gets out there, that there is some opportunity, there are some monies available, especially to the targeted area. And what by targeted area, I refer to the $100,000 to $499,000 businesses. Those are the ones that are, and again, using the word typically, that's not really fair. I don't want to pigeonhole anyone, but we got to make sure that the word gets out there. There's some funds, money's coming available, and to try to reach to the most needy. And by that, I mean the 100,000 to 500,000, probably more needy than the people that are making the 5 million. I just want to make sure we catch the small, really small business people.
Yes, sir. And we'll rely on our partners with the media. We've got some good media here in our community that understands the challenges that we're all facing, and they've been doing a phenomenal job reporting on the information that you all have been discussing and working on over the last month. And we're very hopeful that they'll take this item and put it on the front pages of their news system, and that we feel like we'll do the best at broadcasting this to our Lubbock community. I did want to address one last thing, and that is we recognize that how important obviously the city council is to our two organizations in terms of how the funding represents and all. We honestly in our organizations have always been very regional in approach, because we know that there are people that live here that work in other cities. We know there are people that live in other cities that work here, and it's a very symbiotic relationship with our region. However, while $2 million sounds like a lot of money, it can't go very far when you start trying to help out 7,000 businesses, and that's just in our community. And so our board was very understanding. They were very wishful that we could do it for a bigger region, but they also wished we had more money to be able to do it with. And we recognize that it's in this particular circumstance, we really needed to address these companies that are in our community right now. And having a strong Lubbock is good for the whole region. And we'll continue to strive to improve our region. But this particular program, we are very much highlighting it to those companies that are in the city of Lubbock.
One more request, if you will, Mr. Osborne.
Yes,
Would
sir.
you share the link where they can access this information?
Yes, it is. Let's see if I pull that one up real fast, because I haven't. It is the email that you'll end up sending the documents to is support Lubbock Fund, F-U-N-D, at spag.org. And the website you can go to for more information is either LEDA's website at lubbockeda.org or SPAG's website at www.spag.org.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Titus. Ms. Patterson Harris. I believe you may be muted, Ms. Patterson Harris. Ms. Patterson Harris, we can't hear you at the moment. You appear to be unmuted. Why don't you try to mute yourself and unmute yourself again and see if you come back to us. Okay, now try again. I can't hear you, Ms. Patterson Harris.
Mr. Mayor, while you're trying to find Sheila, I wanted to ask Mr. Osborne a question, if he's still around.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm thinking of our personal service businesses, for example, your barbershop, your hairdresser businesses. That $100,000 floor that you've put on it, I think we're going to miss those people. And those are the people that, because they can't work their business, they don't have any income. Are they excluded from this because of that $100,000 floor?
Well, recognize that's in revenue. That's not in gross profit, or that's not in profit. So that is not, that doesn't take into account what your expenses are. So just because the company doesn't have $100,000 in profit doesn't necessarily mean that they're not having $100,000 in revenue. We did this a little bit.
On your list, I guess is my question.
I'm sorry,
Are they on your list?
We've developed our list from a variety of different sources. And so we can't pull those lists based on revenues. What we're saying for this particular, to make application to this, we've set the floor in a manner that tries to impact those businesses that probably have employees and need assistance right now in this sweet spot that we think was missed by the PPP.
So you want them to have had employees. So if they are self-employed, they probably won't qualify.
No, even a construction contractor that owns his own business, there's a high likelihood that he's got revenues of $100,000 or potential that he has revenues of $100,000. He may have expenses that are $50,000 a year. So he makes $50,000 a year himself, but he at least has revenues of it. So it doesn't take into account the expenses. It just looks at gross revenues, not net revenues.
I get that, but are you also saying that a self-employed person may not qualify for the loan?
No, I'm saying that if the only qualifier, doesn't matter how many jobs the company has, it is and it doesn't matter if you're for profit or not for profit. What matters is the gross revenues. So I'll give kind of a couple of different examples. You have a construction contractor, maybe a bricklayer that lays brick for a living. He just employs himself. If he only makes if he only has revenues of $50,000 a year and $10,000 worth of expenses, then he would not qualify. But if he has revenues of greater than $100,000 a year, it doesn't matter what his expenses are, he would still qualify. If you have a church that has gifts to them, which is revenue of greater than 100,000, they could actually qualify. If you have a nonprofit that has a membership base that's greater than $100,000 in revenue, then they would qualify. But same with the for-profit as well.
And my understanding is that that's last year's revenue. Is that correct, Mr. Osborne? That's how
Yes,
they.
sir.
So it wouldn't the impact they might have had in the last month or five or 6 weeks would not impact their ability to apply. Is that correct?
That's correct. We are asking for 2 years tax returns. And the reason for that is a little bit because of the loan process that SPAG utilizes. But also we want to make sure that this is not just a kind of a fly-by-night company. And so we are looking at 2 years tax returns, but we're looking at just specifically to qualify the 2019 gross revenues of being a minimum of 100,000 and a maximum of 5 million. And then we'll analyze 2020 and see what the impact was to their business. And if it was so significant that they had, or if it was fairly significant and a loss of revenue of 35% or more, then they could get that half of that converted to from a small business loan to a grant. And if it was greatly impacted, 50% down, the whole thing could be converted to a loan. I mean, to a grant.
Can you share that list that you've compiled with us?
Yes. There's a Dun & Bradstreet list that is amazingly long and big. And so, I mean, if you'd like me to, I can. I don't understand what's the concern.
Well, Mr. Chattis had asked you a question about that you had compiled a list of businesses that you thought that you all had reached out to. That's the list I'm asking about.
Prior to ever establishing this fund, we've been calling companies to visit with them and find out their situation. We also were looking for companies that might be hiring so we could put those that became unemployed in touch with those companies that were hiring. And we wanted to do this greater than just our normal companies that we work with, which include manufacturing and headquarters and distribution type operations. And so we reached out to multiple lists of companies, including Dun & Bradstreet, including the Chamber of Commerce, including just our own personal contacts that we have with everyone. We fully understand that we don't have a comprehensive list of every company in our community. And that's one reason why we're trying to ask the media for assistance in getting the word out on this. We recognize also that the bankers that deal with companies on a daily basis, we're reaching out directly to them to say, hey, contact your people as well. I don't think that our list is necessarily comprehensive of everyone, and I'm happy to share it, but we're looking at a lot of different resources of trying to get the word out to all of those small business owners that are hurting right now.
I don't think you answered my question, but
I'm happy to share. I'm happy to share the list with you. Yes, I mean, I don't have any issue with that at all.
I think what Mr. Chattis was driving at is what I'm speaking to. I understand that you all operate in a different world and that the chamber does, but there are lots of small businesses that I think I'm concerned about may never hear of this program. And it bothers me when you say there is a list, but no, there isn't a list. And I just wanted to see if I could figure out who's on your list. But what you're telling me is you really can't.
No, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm being misunderstood. What I'm trying to say is, yes, we have lots of lists that we're working from, and I'm happy to share each of those with you. I would fully expect that not every business in our community is on one or any of those lists. We've not combined them into one list. We've just been working from information that we've got. My hope is that we get the word out using our media to help make sure that we address any company that may need this. And if there's a company that wants to be on our list, they're welcome to call us. We're using the list to try to reach out to our business community to have contact with them to understand their situation. That's the main purpose of it. We developed the program much later.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Osborne.
Yes, sir.
You believe that the media is going to pick up on this afternoon, correct?
My hope is yes, and our belief is yes.
And I think that's our best hope, because there is no exact science to getting all businesses listed. I understand Mr. Chattis and Ms. Joy's concern, and we all want those applicants to be proactive. but the media is going to, we hope that they will pick up on this today. And I understand that you had to put a marker of $100,000 as far as revenue. I get that. And so, and I think smaller entities, there's going to be a lot of them that'll be in that category. If they don't, they probably don't have that many employees. And not, no offense to anyone that, please understand that, no offense to that. However, the media, I hope, will jump on this today, and so that we get a great awareness out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith.
Mayor, I have Ms. Patterson Harris on my cell phone.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Sheila, go ahead.
This is crazy. Hold on, let me turn it down. I don't know how this is gonna work. Can you hear me now? Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I kind of was trying to follow Mr. Chattis, but Miss Joy was able to kind of cover some things. I want to first say a huge thank you to Lita and Mark and Robert for their willingness to put up the funds and assist us together.
Mute your computer, Ms. Sheila.
It is confusing.
Mr. Mayor, I might suggest, if it's okay with Mr. Satterwhite, Ms. Patterson Harris could maybe step out of the room away from where she's got the video. I think the audio will come through much better.
How's that?
Yeah, I think that'd be acceptable.
That's a lot better. That's a lot better, Sheila. Please continue.
I'm going to the backyard. I just wanted to kind of follow Mr. Chattis and first of all thank Lita as well as Mark and Lubbock for the opportunity they're providing for the small businesses in this city. I think it's awesome, the idea, the folks that are doing the work. I really appreciate that. I get concerned too about those businesses that may just fall up under that $100,000. While I understand that this program will not be for them, if there's some way that maybe someone can maybe come up with some ideas to assist those individuals, because I would tend to believe that most of those businesses are going to be your barbers and your hairstylists and maybe even your tattoo parlors, nail techs and all of that. But just to put it in perspective with the concern that Mr. Chattis and I believe Ms. Joy had, is that if I decide that I'm going to have a community barbecue and I tell all my friends and family first, by the time the other folks get in the community get the word, it's not going to be much left. So I think the concern is making sure that everybody gets the same start and not so much of a head start and make an application for these funds. I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great opportunity. And I wish we could help everyone. And I understand that we won't. But we don't want to have a bunch of folks in our hand that we already have at the front of the line to get these funds.
Councilwoman Patterson Harris, thank you for that comment. And I want to reiterate, our team is only gathering information from these companies over the last 6 weeks or so. And we know that there are some that are hurting. Our plans are, after the council votes, that we will send out a press release about this. And we're hopeful that the press will put this on their websites and talk about this in their channels. We will put this on our social media channels as well. And we will begin reaching out to any and all companies that we can touch to let them know about the program. I think the best avenue is for the media, and it will be the quickest. And so, there's no head start for anybody. We've not communicated to any company yet that this program is available. We've only communicated that there is a webinar that is coming up today that people can participate in to learn more about the program. We've been pushing that on social media along with the chamber these last couple of days, and just since Monday. And so that's to try to encourage people to register and to get signed up to learn more about the program. It's not to make application for it at all. The SPAG website will go live this afternoon or after the council votes today, and people can begin applying at that point. But there's no head start for one business over another. We're really doing, in all honesty, we were trying our very best to get the word out about this. And I felt like if we just relied on the media, or if we just relied on a phone call from me, that wasn't good enough. That we tried to do all methods to get the word out about this.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask Mr. Osborne a question, please?
Sure.
Is there any sort of template or something or a link to this information that you could give to us that I would be more than happy to put it on my social media and direct people to you guys? I've got quite a few on mine, and I think that would be something that would be appropriate for any of our council members to do, is to use their social media circle to try to get this information out as well. One other question on your media contact sheet, is it pretty inclusive in regards to radio as well? I was thinking in terms of some of the Tejano stations and some of those stations that might at least be able to talk about it a little bit on those stations. I'm assuming you probably do. I'll turn mute on and listen.
Yes, all good questions. And we have been sending, we will send our press, we send all of our press releases to all the media here in town, but we do intend to send that to both newspaper, TV, radio, any of those that are on kind of the main list. And it's a fairly significant, Catherine, if you're listening, could you give me a total number on that? Then I would also say that we have that one sheet that does a great job of explaining everything that we intend to start sharing after the council votes today. And you're welcome to share those posts if you want, but I'll also send you that one sheet to each of you all, so you can give it directly to those companies, whether they're on social media or not. And our intentions honestly are to try to get this in front of as many companies as possible in our city limits. And I don't want that to sound like that things are limited, or that we're trying to purposely limit who gets this or not.
One of the last thing, John, is there something that we could attach to emails? If we have email requests for information, it'd be something that we could attach in response to our city email address. I'm sure that would be appropriate as well. Thank you.
I think that one sheet is going to do the best. It does a great job of explaining everything, and it directs them to the correct website. And so to get more information, and it does a good job of explaining it all. So I'll be glad to share each of those. In fact, I'll forward it to Jarrett here shortly so that he can get it out to the council.
Okay, so further questions on this item, Mr. Chavez?
Thank you, Mayor. More of a statement than my concern, Mr. Osborne. I know this list can't be all encompassing, but if we follow the national trend, it's always the fat cat that goes up to the front of the line. I just want to make sure that the little guy, for example, the barber, the hairstylist, the salon people, most of these people are contractors, and they're going to be falling way short of the 100,000. But yet it seems that the less money that you make, the larger the impact. And I congratulate you for what you're doing. Not to diminish what you're doing at all. It's just my concern is for the little guy. You know, I mean, I know my barber's not making 100 grand, let alone 499. But yet his impact, financial impact, is just as large. And again, if you can share that information with me as well, or with the council, so we can forward the information, the email addresses to our contacts. I think that would be very beneficial. And our intent is not to leave anyone out. as the phrase has been used before, we're not picking winners or losers, but unfortunately, somebody will be left out. I would feel very comfortable saying that I have shared, distributed whatever information that's available to me to our constituents. So whatever you can do to share some info with us to help you with this daunting task. And I hope when you do your media blitz that somebody out there will do or has already had the forethought of doing this media blitz in the Spanish language as well. Because I know there's quite a few business people out there that are catering to the Spanish speaking people. So we want to make sure that we leave no one out. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I completely agree. We will send it to the Spanish speaking radio stations. I know Latino Lubbock is on our list, and I know all of them have a great reach for our Hispanic community. KCBD, KLBK, KMAC, they'll all receive this as well. Avalanche Journal, they'll receive it, but all of our radio stations will receive it as well. And our intent is not to try to leave out the little guy. We're trying to get the word out to as many people as possible that there is some help that's available now. We recognize that it's not possible to help every single business in our community with what limited funds we have. That's one reason why the SBA, we waited to see how that program developed and how it operated. And then we tailored this program to try to affect those that had were having the most challenges.
Okay, before we vote, a couple things. First of all, the U.S. Senate last night approved another version of the CARES Act, sort of a fourth piece. And in that is another $310 billion for this payroll protection plan. So remember that was 350 originally in the CARES Act, and it's 310 in this act. That should get very close to taking care of those businesses that apply. They also went in and wrote some guidelines into it to make sure that smaller banks had access to it. And they earmarked some of the funds for smaller banks, which generally deal with smaller clients. Okay, so there's more help coming from the federal side. If our businesses need help on that, they can go to they can call a small business development center locally. They can go to the website that was set up, Hub City Small Business Triage, hubcitysmallbusinesstriage.com. You've got grad students at Texas Tech standing by to help our businesses apply for these dollars. Okay, so that's the federal side. Now, at a local level, I think we've beaten this thing up a little bit. I'm very thankful for the fact that Market Lubbock and LEDA came together and found $2 million. And let's not lose the good news in all of this. And it's for any business that did at least $100,000 in revenue. So that means a business needs to bill a little more than $350 a day, or about $45 an hour. A lot of barbers are billing $45 an hour. So a lot of our smallest businesses will qualify for this. And they're the ones that I feel like are in the lurch. They're the ones that are most exposed. And that's why I'm so excited about these efforts. And I'm very thankful that we're able to extend something like this.
Thank you, Mayor. All great information. Agree.
Okay. One more just before we.
Mr. Mayor, just quick request is that when this program is complete, that we would receive a report on how those dollars were expended, and to the extent possible, who they were expended to and what businesses, because we are dealing in LEDA with taxpayer dollars. And I think we're guardians of those dollars. So I do want to report at the end to be made. I'm sure it'll be made to the LEDA board, but to the city council as well. Thanks.
Yeah, great request. I would assume that's standard operating procedure, but I think we'll just put that make sure that's in the record. I think that's a very good point. Okay. Ms. Patterson Harris, I believe is on video, but we're still having audio problems with her. So we're going to do it via a voice vote. If you'll unmute, and I'll just go do a roll call real quick. Mayor Pro Tem.
have we called the question as far as the resolution?
No, I thought we were through. Is there further, are there further, you have further questions?
No,
Do you want to call the question?
I'd like to call the question to approve 2.1-1, the resolution.
And that would be 2.1 and 2.11, correct?
Thank you.
Yes, okay. Question's been called. We'll do a voice vote. We'll start with you, Mayor Pro Tem. How do you stand on this? Are you in favor of this? Aye. Ms. Joy,
Yes.
Mr. Chidas,
Yes.
Mr. Christian,
Yes.
Mr. Massengale,
Yes.
Ms. Patterson Harris.
Yes.
Thank you, council. That's a unanimous vote in a 7-0 in approval of item 2.1 and item 2.11. I believe that takes care of the business on our agenda today. Ms. Garza, is that correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Satterwhite, you have anything for us?
No, sir, that's it.
Okay, I would remind folks that are watching us that we have a regularly scheduled council meeting next Tuesday afternoon. We'll be back then. We'll have more, recommendations from the Lubbock Economic Recovery Task Force at that time. In the meantime, we encourage citizens to remain safe and to remain hopeful. It is 11:57. It's a great day in Lubbock, Texas. The Lubbock City Council is adjourned.